lovely war, the lovely war, be a soldier, eh?
Hello everybody and welcome to Oh What a Lovely Podcast, where popular culture meets the First World War. I'm Chris Kempshaw and I'm joined today by Angus Wallace. Jessica isn't able to join us today, which admittedly makes it sound like me and Angus have staged some kind of a coup in that I'm now introducing this. But as we've been talking about it for quite a long time, today's topic is going to be First World War computer games. And I am delighted to say that we are joined today by Yoan Fanise from DigixArt, one of the kind of the leading figures behind computer games such as Valiant Hearts: The Great War and 11/11 Memories Retold. And we're going to be asking him some kind of questions about the turning of the First World War into computer games. But to begin with, Yoan, I was wondering if we might kind of kick off with a little bit of kind of background. So how long have you been working in kind of the computer game industry, as it were?
It's been, I think it's been 20 years now, so I feel a bit old now. But yeah, I mean, in video games, I don't know if we can last long, but we'll see. It was a bit of a luck. I was a sound designer, sound editor for movies and anime. And one day they asked me to do sounds for a game. This game was called Beyond Good and Evil. It became famous after that. Yeah, it was my chance to work in the video game industry, and it was not planned at all. And it just by chance, and then boom, sound, more creative stuff, because sound was good, but I wanted to express more stuff. And then they gave me a chance at Ubisoft to do my own stuff. And then I suggested Valiant Hearts. I said, yeah, why could we speak about war in another way? You know, video game is always, war games are a certain type of games, and maybe we can talk about war as a real thing. And they were a bit surprised, and they say, why not? It was a small project, so I was like, okay, maybe we can try. But yeah, it was a big adventure at the end. It was the big change in my life. So it's funny, and I was not much into. I love the history, but I was not a specialist or in any kind. I was just the guy who likes to read stuff and discover new things about your past. But I was not a specialist at all when starting the project at the beginning.
That's quite interesting in itself. So, what point did you have the idea of doing like a First World War game, which was Valiant Hearts with Ubisoft, before you started reading about First World War stuff, or was there something that you read that you thought, actually, maybe there's a game in this?
I think it was a mix of both, because World War I is important in our history in France, as it is in UK. For me, more especially with my family, my great-grandfather was in the trenches, and I got all these memories in my grandparents' house. And maybe that was something infusing in you, because when you are a child, you see those objects, those stuff, and you go sometimes in the cemetery, seeing the grave, and it's written a lot of stuff about World War I. So maybe it's, unconscious stuff that makes you, at least me, more binding with World War I than World War II. I don't know why. It was more obvious, and maybe World War II sometimes is more, at least for me, is more fuzzy, blurry, like, the relation to Nazi and those things. Maybe stuff are not said yet. Maybe some stuff are still to be discovered, or maybe, yeah, as for World War I, it's more obvious, and this is what happened, and this is what, you have some photo, and there's as World War II, maybe sometimes you would need to dig more to find what happened.
That idea of that family connection, because the imagery is extremely distinctive when you look at Valiant Hearts, and it struck me as being slightly more. It's not as flippant as some like first-person shooters could be. We were saying before, Chris and I, they just reskin things. This is a look, and and it's very, it adds weight to it. And I wonder if that family connection made you really want to make it look, I don't know. I know it's cartoon, but it feels authentic.
Yeah, that's weird. That's the weird thing, is that it was a 2D game, very stylized. So very far from realism. And in another way, the emotion, the story is more realistic than in other games. So this contrast is still very bizarre today. But maybe this is because it's not realist visually. That's why maybe you bind more with the characters, and it's a story like a memory that you can really, you can relate to that. You can, maybe your brain is imagining more things from those drawings. And maybe that's why the cutscenes in Valiant Hearts, they are very simple, because Paul, the fabulous artist who did the drawing, was almost alone to make the drawings. So we had to keep it simple. So it was like, okay, this cutscene, just one drawing, we make it move, and that's it. But the work of voice and music, and because it was more easy for me, it was my specialty. So I was like, okay, I'm going to put this music, this dialogue, voiceover, and then, okay, we're going to get it, and people will understand with one picture. And sometimes it's more powerful, in fact, than animation, than all the problems you can get with animation. Yeah, maybe it's more efficient, to have 2D stylized. Yeah.
Did you, thinking about that kind of the impact and the emotional impact of in Valiant Hearts, and it's a very weird one trying to talk about a computer game, because I'm always like, I've got a voice in my head going, we can't give spoilers for a game that came out 7 years ago. And we don't, we want people to go to go and play it. But were you kind of, when you were creating the story behind it, were you aware that this is probably going to make people cry? Because if you go on YouTube and type in reactions to Valiant Hearts, it's just like image after image of people playing it, sobbing their hearts out.
Yeah, I didn't expect that. Though, when because I love sad stories. In fact, I love movies, when it's finished with a bad ending, and it's life. We all die at the end. So I love that, and I hate, the
spoilers.
And yeah, but I hate those, all these American movies who always finish with a happy ending, no matter what happens during the movie, and there's no surprises. And so I thought, if we want to talk about this war particularly, where there were so many dead people, we need to have people who will die for sure. So from the beginning, there was this idea of having some of them maybe dying. And then the whole story was meant to tell that story and to reach that point. And I was happy when I did the tweaking of the last sequence, and I mixed it, and I put it the right music, the right moment. And then even myself, hopefully I was alone in the studio. So I even started to cry myself, even though I knew exactly the dialogues, I knew exactly the music. Once it was all together, at this moment, there was this very strong emotion. And that was, maybe at that moment, I was thinking maybe we have something different here. I brought someone from the team, Kevin, who is an American, to make sure it was the dialogues were good and everything. And he went in. I just played the last sequence, and he also had a very strong emotion. And I say, okay, so it works. So, and even better, after that, we had a playtest, and during that playtest session, when we finally had the whole game together, it was the first time we had the game together, and a few young people, they came and tested the game, and two of them started crying at the end. And the playtester guy, the QA guy over there, he was thinking it was because of personal reasons. He said to the girl, he went to the girl. He was very sorry. He said, "Oh, do you have issues or do you have something?" And she said, "No, this game is so sad." And then after that, the marketing started to really believe into the game. Before that, they really didn't care about us. But that was good. In a way, we were free to do whatever we wanted. So I loved that freedom we had. And then after that, the marketing department, they say, "What? This game has something different. Okay, maybe we still need to do something." So yeah, and that was good. And after that, it was quite close to the end. In fact, there was an E3 moment, where we showed a trailer. And then boom, the game was out, I think, 2 months after that. And then it was crazy because everybody started to play the game. It was crazy. It was like, for me, I was not expecting that because it was the first time I was writing a story. The biggest surprise for me was after that, all the ask for coming to get some awards. And I was like, what? And they say, yeah, come over to Las Vegas. Come over to... I was like, what? And it was crazy. Maybe it's just if you have something to say and it was from the heart and we really wanted to tell that story. And we did documentate a lot with historians, and we did our homework also to work seriously on the subject. Maybe also that counts to not just, do something a bit superficial.
You say it was only when you did the sound design and the final scene that the marketing department really got it and bought into it. At which point, how did you sell it to Ubisoft at the start that you've got, I've got a First World War idea for a First World War game, and First World War games aren't necessarily a genre that trips off the tongue as being super popular, and it's got a sad ending. Again, it seems like you're selling the impossible. So how did you approach selling a sad First World War?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of different factors, but the good thing is that the CEO, Yves himself, is the French CEO of Ubisoft, is sensitive is open to a lot of things, and is not only on business. So that's good. He is open to other ideas. And in this case, we were lucky that we found that moment where it was open, and it was a very small project also. So I think the risk was not big for Ubisoft. It was a very, very small project. And the subject maybe matters to him also. I think he was interested into the subject also. And also I sold it with the centenary. Of course, I said, it's going to be the centenary. You cannot miss that. Ubisoft is a French company. You have to talk about that. So I said almost it would be a mistake to not talk about World War One. I say, okay, why not? And so, maybe that's why they allowed us to start the project. And then the fact that the playtests were good and that people got an interest into playtesting the game, maybe that made them, okay, maybe we have to launch that game. Because sometimes, in video game, it's very sad. You can work for years on a project that is killed. Sometimes when it's even ready, like you have the project ready. Yeah, we started to work at some point with the centenary mission, in France, the governmental centenary mission. Because for my research, it was good to have historians and people to help me. And then because they really loved the project and they say, okay, we have to work on that project. Maybe after that, there was no more option to cancel the project because we were working with the government. So it would be like, weird to say, for business reason, we're going to cancel it. It would have been. So I think after that, it was okay. It's a good way to secure the project.
What I was actually going to say, because and you just kind of touched on it then, that you worked with the Centenary and you worked with Mission Centenaire, and also you had contacts with the people who were making the documentary series Apocalypse, World War One, as well. So how did that kind of relationship with historians work for you? Because obviously, you're creating a computer game, which is a piece of media, and Ubisoft, whilst they're interested in the story that you're telling, I imagine most computer game companies have got an eye on the bottom line of is this going to sell? Is this going to make us money? So how did you work with historians to kind of build up the historical elements within the game?
The good thing is that at that moment, we already had a skeleton of the game. We already had the levels started. So they could, the Mission Centenaire and Apocalypse, they could see the skeleton of the game already. They could see the sequence. I already chose which sequence was going to be where and when. I did the whole path of the characters depending on the battles and the front I wanted to talk about. So it was more on, is it all true? Is it to verify all the things I've put in? and to sometimes put even more, like saying in Neuf-Chapelle, say, oh, there was the Indians and stuff. And sometimes I missed some stuff I didn't know, and say, whoa, okay, there's something about the English Indians corpse over there. Okay, wow. Okay, then we need to talk. And then we changed some stuff and say, okay, then we change the character and we change Tommy's by Indians. And that was very interesting for us to adapt like this. So yeah, it was more like enhancing the game. And then after that came the idea of putting the historical facts. At the beginning, there was no historical facts in the game. But the more we were working on the game, the more I was showing to the team like the facts, all the documents. You know, I was crazy with that. And maybe I was boring with people, but because I always show them pictures and text.
Don't worry, you've come to the right place.
And I was like, yeah, you see, that happened and this happened to this guy. And then they say, and sometimes it was very interesting. So even for non-passionate people. And so I said, yeah, you see, it's interesting. And one day, I think it's a level designer of the game. He told me, you know what? This is very interesting, indeed. So maybe we could even like show that to the player. And I say, yeah, that would be so cool to show that to the player. And then the idea of putting those historical facts came in the loop. And then with the Centenary mission and with Apocalypse for the pictures, basically we said, okay, it's good if we have nice pictures. We need to clear the rights. You know, it's complex to clear the rights of every photo, blah, blah, blah. So we need a source that we can get. And then the marketing said, it's very marketing. They said, you know, black and white picture, it's not very fancy. So they say, you know, there is this Apocalypse thing that is colorized. So maybe it's better to have colorized photo. And I was like, okay, if you want, we can take the colorized version. I'm not sure. But then we took some photo from Apocalypse. We still kept some black and white photo because I love, you know, those photos. Sometimes it's the same thing. Sometimes they have more emotion. It's like 2D. Sometimes a good black and white photo really express something. But and at the end it was very nice because we got a lot of material and they could clear the rights, the copyrights for those photos. So that was nice, and they helped us shape the form of it, because I knew that if we put too much text, people would not read it. So I said, okay, we need to limit the length of text in those panels, and just having one panel, a big photo, a small text, and a button. On the iOS version of the game, you have a button, and if you want to know more, you can press the button, boom, and then we send you to the Centenary website and other websites. So we still have a link to more stuff. So that was nice. But yeah, or at least on the console version, there's just the text of the panel because we cannot link to an external website. If we talk about those historical panels, one of the things that happened that was the team was very sad about that, but it's just a detail. It's just a minor detail. It's one review from IGN Italia, or I don't remember the website, but still a big one like IGN. And the guy said in the review, "Oh, what I don't like in that game is those historical panels. They pop in your face." And I was like, "What? They don't even pop in your face. You have to click." If you want to see them. So because we don't even like push it to you. I was like, what? It's you. If you want.
You Philistine.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, I was mad. I was like, come on, if you don't want to read historical, but the good thing is that we didn't have to reply, because a lot of people in the comments, they say, no, it's you. If you don't want, you don't press the button, and that's it.
How did you choose which facts to put in? Because obviously you're talking about a war that's 100 years old. Would you say your great-grandparents were, and it was hang on, let me get this right. It's my grandfather and great-grandfather. You know, it's starting to get quite a long way away. So how do you choose which facts to put in? Or do you find yourself putting in facts that you know people like? So, I mean, for example, people always love facts about guns, even if you have no idea what you're talking about when you're talking about millimeters and calibers and things like that. So it must be quite difficult with choosing which things to tell people about in these pop-ups.
Yeah, and at the beginning we had, I think in my list I had 300 facts I wanted to talk about, and then they said no, we cannot do 300 stuff. It would mean 300 photos to clear. It's not possible. So then I reduced it. I think at the end we have 100 and something facts in the game. So still happy with that number, and we try to mix to have like funny facts that we know people will like, even though it's not very educative in a way, but they still like it, and trying to panache it to have sometimes an important fact and sometimes something more funny, an anecdote on something, but it was more to keep a balance, a rhythm of those facts, to not being boring. I think my biggest fear was to be boring, because at school I didn't like history because of that, and that's why when I did that game I say, okay, we're gonna do that, but my biggest fear is to be boring. So let's if we feel this is too long or this is too we change it, we adapt the rhythm, like a movie. Sometimes you have movies that are too long. We have to cut the crap.
Do you find that the facts change? Because computer games are international, at which point somebody might not like a fact because they're from a different computer. At which point you sit there going, which facts are the most
but
agreed on or generic? Or
the interesting thing, I wanted to have a global vision, and I wanted to, maybe it's political, I don't know, but I wanted people to know that a lot of people fight during World War One, and that they were not necessarily from our continent, and that they came from very far. And I wanted also some facts to keep them in. Like say, no, people has to know that this happened. So it was those ones, they were important for me. And also some other, we had a nice work with the localization team that for example, for the how you say in English, the médaillon, the badges, like the
medals.
Yeah. And those ones, they did a very nice work on changing them depending on the country you play. So if you are German, if you play the game in German, you're not going to have the same fact. So you're going to have a fact about the German medals or stuff. That was very nice. I was like, wow, the work with the localization team, it was awesome, because they really wanted to make it interesting for their country also, to not feel a French game, because otherwise all the facts could have feel a bit Frenchy. So it was like, no, we need to talk about this and this and this. So.
What is the biggest computer game market? I presume it's the US.
Yeah, of course it's US. That's why marketing was very afraid of that game. They said they did a survey, and they said, in US they mix the two World War Ones. It's like World War One, World War Two, blah 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 blah. It's a war. So, and even now, I have a lot of journalists or people saying Valiant Hearts is about World War II. So it's it's a bit sad.
But it's difficult because they don't have the cultural baggage that we, being involved with both First World Wars. It's not quite as deep. So you're choosing your facts, presumably, because the baggage isn't there. You have to almost make it more obvious, presumably, explaining what's going on. Yeah.
And for them, it was a bit the same, like they just send troop over and and they come back, and it's like it's a bit the same history for them. So I know I understand that, but I think it's good, and it's good that after that there was Battlefield 1, there was other games, big ones like that that treated about World War One. So I think it's a good thing, and I don't know if Valiant Hearts played a role on that. I hope so. I hope that it maybe opened a way to say, okay, you can have a game that can be successful on World War One. So maybe it's something we can talk more.
So how did you get from Valiant Hearts to the Great War what's the Great War in 1111? Memories Retold.
Yeah, this one was a very British story, I would say. I met people from Hartman, the famous animation studio, and I met those people in Paris in a festival, and I love the movies and the culture behind Hartman. They are very great people, and it's something very important for a lot of creators in the world. And I was so glad to meet with them, and we talked about World War One, about Valiant Hearts, about a lot of things. And they wanted to make games, and I was like, oh, okay, but then we need to do something together for sure. And I was starting DigixArt at that moment, a small indie studio, and we already did a very small game, but we were about to start the second project of the studio, and we didn't have any animator or artist in the studio. And I said, maybe that's the perfect combination to work with you. You take care of the art, you take care of the animation, of the cutscenes, and we take care of the rest. And we worked with historians on both sides. And they were really like, they say, yeah, we need to do that. It was an obvious choice to do that project together. And that the challenge was, okay, but we want to make a 3D game. We want to step up, to have something more immersive, more ambitious. And so that was the big goal. It was more complex because we were, working with two different studios and a pretty young structure for us also, with a Japanese publisher, Bandai. So it was complex to work on that project. And also we wanted to launch the game at the end of the centenary for sure, for obvious marketing reasons. So all in one, it was, I would say, more difficult to create that game. And maybe you can feel it into the game itself also. But still, we did our maximum to express different things into that game. We wanted to talk more about the Canadian aspect, involvement into the game also. So that was something we really wanted to tackle, to show that it was more worldwide. Because if you play Valiant Hearts, you could feel, okay, it's just Europe. And some people, I think, called it the European War. No, there was something like that. Maybe it's this time it was an occasion to say, no, it's worldwide, and there were people coming from very far.
You covered different theatres as well, though, don't you, in Great War?
Yeah. And so that's why I wanted to start with a Canadian guy, not knowing what's going to happen to him, going very, very far from home, and discovering after that what is war. Like to have this naive aspect of someone who is a photographer who doesn't know what's going to happen for him. I really love that. And so we wanted also to have a more balanced point of view. The idea was to have a 50-50, like you're going to play as much on the two sides. So that was the goal of this game also. So to work more with German historians like Robin Schaeffer and other people from Deutschland, to make sure that, okay, we have the two point of view. And that was very interesting. That's something I didn't have for Valiant Hearts, was the discussion between the two sides. And it was so funny when we were talking about the letters, the freedom of being able to send those kind of letters, or to being able to send this kind of objects to the trenches for your relatives. And on the French side, it was like, no, we can't. We are not allowed to do that. They were, boom, the letter will not arrive at all if you say something that you're not supposed to say. And on the German side, say, no, we could. So some surprising stuff. And also the cleanness, the trench, the trench on the other side, so clean. So I was like, wow. Sometimes it was, the contrast was huge. And it was a pleasure to be able to show more of that difference. Because also, on school, we always learn more about our side. And it's always like, okay, this is what happened, and there was Verdun, Verdun is important. It's like, so I wanted to go even more beyond that and say, no, it's just like, let's take a look at everywhere. And also at of the back, far from the trenches, on the German side, because this is something you never talk about in France. like what happened in Germany. And so that's why I really wanted the character to travel, even though it could feel very fictional. It's far from reality in certain aspects. In 1111, it's more like a fairy tale. But when you go with that train and you arrive in a small village, I love that. And I read that in a lot of testimonies from prisoners, they were sent in farms to work in the farm. And they were working almost like free, in a farm. You work in the outside, and there are stories about men and women becoming together because the German guy is at war, and so it's weird. so I love this kind of situation.
One of the things I liked about both Valiant Hearts and Memories Retold is this kind of national aspect that you're talking about. In that, if you're playing Valiant Hearts in France, you're going to have an understanding of the French experience of the war. Similarly, if you play Memories Retold in Germany or if you play Memories Retold in Canada, I'm teaching Canadian students at the moment, and they've got an understanding of, the Canadian experience, what Vimy Ridge was, and all that type of stuff. But what I find interesting is how little of that actually transfers about between countries. So I think a lot of the reaction you get in Britain and America, particularly to say something like Valiant Hearts, is that, a key plot point in that game hinges on the French Chemin des Dames offensive and then the French mutiny. And, there's an element of that appears in the game. But that has absolutely no place in Western, British or American memory of the First World War, which is why I think that the thing that happens at the end of Valiant Hearts catches everybody out, because you don't understand what it is that you're seeing. I watched that and I played that as a First World War historian. I was like, well, I know where this game's going. I'm pretty sure I now know how this is going to end. But, no one who hasn't wasted their life reading and reviewing and, interacting with the First World War is going to have an understanding of what happens after the French mutinies, or what Vimy Ridge is, or the German experience of the Allied blockade and starvation at home. So you get that, there's a historical nugget there, but it plays into everybody's blind spots because we have no idea what anybody else's experience of the war was.
Yeah, and that was a good surprise, because for me, I was afraid that the opposite could happen, because in France, we teach a lot about mutiny and what happened at that moment, and les fusillés and the people killed by our own army. I was afraid that it could be too much like a cliché, too much like, okay, it's going to finish by this. And in fact, no, like you said, other countries don't know much about that fact. And in France, maybe because there is, sometimes this anti-war, anti-everything, you like to finish by that. But it's hard to try to avoid cliché and still wanting to talk about the biggest element, the most. So yeah, it's hard to balance between those two. But if you still don't talk about the famous battles and the famous places, you still think you're gonna miss something. But it's really hard to find a good balance.
With Memories Retold, one of the things that kind of got launched alongside the game, I think it was in the collector's edition also, was the graphic novel that you put together, which had kind of like a telling of the story of the major protagonists and kind of alongside historical information about, general context. And the historical information, if I do say so myself, was beautifully written as the person who wrote it. What was the thought process? Why did you decide that actually, we want to have, or was it just kind of, this is a cool thing for a special edition? Or was it because you got a little bit of extra freedom from somewhere like that you might have previously had from Ubisoft? The idea of, actually we can do a bit more with the history of this that isn't necessarily all going to make it into the game. What was the thought process behind that?
I think, yeah, it's for fulfilling the if you want to know more. And I think the good thing is that now with and now with even more with Assassin's Creed or this type of games, they know that people want to know more. And before they were afraid that it would interest nobody, like nobody would say, oh, I don't care. And in fact, no. And that's the good thing. They discovered that with Valiant Hearts, with Assassin's Creed, that people want to know more. That's why also they do this very nice edition. In Assassin's Creed, you can have a historical way of playing. And I love that. And I think it showed them that people are willing to learn more than what they think, maybe. So it's a very good lesson for all of us. And making books and other products, I would say, like that, is a very good way to go beyond that. And even the marketing now, they're really if it's fulfilling both goals, that okay, you want to have a special products like a very nice edition, collector edition, or something that has a value for you as a marketer, but that has also a big value for us as creators, and we want to tell that. It's good, because then both entities have a good reason to make it happen, and it's a really good thing. And working with you and with the, I don't remember his name, sorry, the guy who did the maps, and I was like, for me it was good to discover that this is a job, like to make a map is a real job. Like, wow. I was like, wow. And it's a speciality. Like, it's very hard to make a clear map of something. Like,
when you did Memories Retold, so you've got, there's you as a French studio, there's Aardman, and you're working for Bandai, who's funding it from Japan. And Japan, his involvement is minimal in the war. But I just wondered how much that push and pull works of what's going in it from a narrative point of view, or was everyone clear on what the narrative was going to be, or did you find that Aardman were sort of pushing in more British stuff and you're filtering in a sort of a different French perspective?
No. Luckily, there was no kind of things like that. It was the good thing was that Bandai was very on making a good narrative. For them, it was important that the story would be engaging, that the narrative was good, and they have strong pillars and strong values at Bandai Namco. And one of their pillars is making good on Earth. And so it's a big pillar. And so that's why I said, okay, I think maybe this game can try to do something on this. And so we're talking about the two sides, talking about the German side, talking about all sides, like the humanity behind it. Maybe it helps. And so that's why Japan were really pushing on. They let us do whatever we want. In fact, in the story, there were never a moment where they could have say, "Oh, can you remove that?" Or so that was very good, and we had a total freedom on the story. And the story was done with everybody. So, like usual, when I do games, the story is made by basically the whole team. So I just feed the team with stuff, historical facts, ideas, and Pinterest, a lot of Pinterest. Then we try to make something that makes sense in the middle of that. The good thing is for 11.11, we worked with two British writers also, Jan and Sharky. The risk could have been that it would be too British maybe, because there was Hartman, the two writers were British, but I was there also to balance it, with the French aspect, and nobody was there to make an exclusive like British story, and there was no partners like BBC or whatever. So
telling you've got to do the SOM.
24-hour SOM.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, and for me it was important. The first angle was Canada for me. So the starting point for me was more, okay, we need at least to talk about Canadian battles.
Do you think it's easier to make a First World War game now than it was when you were making Valiant Hearts? Or easier to sell it to a development company or to the public? Is it, was it more of a risk for Valiant Hearts than it would be for making something now, do you think?
Maybe it can sound pretentious to say that, but I hope it opened a breach, like it opened something to say to marketers, hey, it can sell, it's World War One, but it can interest people. And maybe, I don't know, in the history, I should ask people from Battlefield 1 if it played a role, like to say, okay, there was this game that worked, so maybe if we do a big AAA on World War I, it can work, I don't know. And the big surprise for me was the movie, the woman, the superhero movie that happened in World War One setting.
Oh, Wonder Woman.
Yeah, Wonder Woman. I was like, what? I was so surprised with this one.
I mean, if it helps, I have spoken to people at Battlefield 1 and they did play Valiant Hearts in the lead up to making their game.
Yeah? Wow.
They definitely did.
Wow. Oh, so cool. Oh, no, I'm so glad.
They played Valiant Hearts and they watched Apocalypse World War One and other documentaries. For ages, I've been saying that Valiant Hearts plus the first-person shooter game Verdun equaled Battlefield 1, because Verdun showed that people would play a first-person shooter, and Valiant Hearts showed that there were stories to tell in the First World War, and EA Dice went, thanks very much, and made their game.
Wow. I would love, honestly, to work with them, with Battlefield team, to make because if you take the assets, the really nice 3D stuff they did, like all those assets, and if you put a real story, like that could be amazing. But
if you did them again, would you change anything? I mean, you're obviously making them when you did them with the backdrop to the centenary.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that made you feel like you had to put certain things or come to certain conclusions. Would you change much if you did them again?
Yeah, I have a lot of regrets. Maybe I should not, but yeah, creatively there's always tons of stuff that you would like to make, and because of time and even of capacity to do something, you cannot. And you happen to kill sequences and to change and simplify and yeah, sometimes I miss certain sequences that like there was one that it's still in the game, but it's not the same mood, like the one when you are in the poppy fields, and I wanted in 11.11, I wanted you to really feel almost like a first person, like that you crawl into the poppies, into a giant field of poppies, and you are very small because you crawl, you try to find a specific body, and yeah, but this one for me was, in my mind, it was very more immersive, and finally you find that body that really matters to you, and then the action of raising and going on your feet, but not being killed by the other ones in front of you, because they realize that you're just here to get a body of someone you really care. And this moment for me, I would redo that sequence. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff like that I would redo with more budget and a specific pacing and yeah, because this is stuff I read in different testimonies from soldiers, that when you read that in a book, you can really imagine it, you can really feel it. And sometimes when you don't succeed to translate it into the game, it's a bit frustrating, and it's because of a lot of reasons. And sometimes in a game, when you have the character control, those things, you cannot do whatever you want. And the camera, a lot of things that are really for video game. Sometimes you would prefer even to do a kind of a movie, but it would be boring if it would be a movie. And also in the last game, the biggest regret is that we didn't have time to make the aspect, the look of it very detailed, because the idea was to have a living painting. The living painting stuff, it was really, really hard to tackle. Technically, it was maybe a too big challenge. And it was very hard to try to get this painting, but still having some details on the faces, so yeah, but it was almost like an experiment.
The solution to this is to make a third one. Just keep making games.
After 2, the whole team was like, okay, no more World War I. And I say, okay, guys, okay. But maybe one day coming back, or maybe World War II, but it's so much different from World War II. I don't know. My secret hope is that Ubisoft would still make a sequel of Valiant Hearts. But from what I know, it's not a plan. But that's too sad. If one day, honestly, I think that would be really something. And everybody should make a petition, sign something and say, nah, you have to make a sequel. Come on, Ubisoft, you have to do it. And maybe it should, come on, it's nothing for them. Ubisoft is so big, they could. Maybe it's the price of a big trailer or whatever.
Well, we've got millions of listeners here, so I don't doubt that they'll be typing away at their emails as soon as this goes live.
Yeah, we need to. You can trigger that. Yeah.
Well, I think that's probably all that we've got time for. Because I'm not a good judge of this, because I could carry on talking about this for the rest of my life, and hopefully we'll get the opportunity to do exactly that. But thank you very much indeed, Yoan, for coming along and talking to us. We've been wanting to do a computer game episode for quite some time, so that's one ticked off of the bucket list. Angus, what have we got planned for next week or next time?
I have next time? I have absolutely no idea, Chris. What have we got planned for next time?
I don't know either. We haven't thought that far ahead.
Well, I guess it'll be a surprise.
It'll be a surprise to the listeners. It'll be a surprise to the presenters. Jessica will be back from then. She'll have organised this in a manner that makes us seem like we're professionals. So thank you all very much indeed for listening. Thanks again to Yoan, and we will see you all on Oh What a Lovely Podcast next month.
It's a lovely war. Oh, we want with eggs and ham when we got plum and apple jam. Come fast, Richard, how can we spend the Bolivian? Oh, it's a lovely war.